How's it going, folks? Thank you all for coming. We've got a number of folks from the Salesforce team here, from the Salesforce Developer Relations team. Adam Gross is a VP of Developer Marketing. Is that right, Adam? To my left. We've been working with Adam and with his team for several months now. We participated in their developer conference back in May. They've got another conference, which I'm sure Adam will get into coming up. That's a much broader scope conference. And we want to kind of continue to increase our participation there. As I mentioned on an email out to a number of you over the past day or so, Salesforce just does a lot of things well, a lot of things that we would like to learn from, that we really need to learn from them. They're great partners of ours on the enterprise side. We're a customer of theirs, and they're a customer of ours, and there's a lot of synergies on both the developer side and the product side. On the community side, and so what I want to do is have the Salesforce team come and talk to us a little bit more about the developer platform, about Apex, about AppExchange, and whatever you guys have questions with, because it's the kind of thing where a few of us have actually been involved in working with them and have learned quite a bit, but we really need to broaden that coupling between Google and Salesforce. So I will let Adam take it away.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Jeff, for putting this together, and thank you, everybody, for taking the time to come hear what we're up to. It's certainly a privilege and an honor to be able to come down here and talk to people who are working on such interesting problems about some of the stuff that we're working on. So I probably, I'm thinking about getting ready to give a presentation at Google, and what's the right way to do that. So, and obviously an audience that's going to be much more sophisticated than an average audience we deal with. So I brought about 3 hours of material that I've got now about 50 minutes to get through, which is another way of saying there are a lot of things we can cover, and happy to keep this as interactive and informal as possible, and just make sure everyone gets their questions answered. Thought I'd kind of talk about a couple different things. The first is just how many people are familiar with Salesforce.com in general, kind of what we're up to. How many of you have ever used our application? Okay, great. So what I thought I'd talk about is a little bit, what's the company about? Where do we come from? What are the problems we're trying to solve? How are we trying to solve those problems from kind of a technical point of view? And by that I mean more the developer-facing view, our developer community-facing view of how you build applications, how you interact with our platform technically, what are our APIs, what's our app dev model look like, as opposed to the actual internal physical implementation behind the scenes of Salesforce.com, which is a whole separate interesting conversation. And then just finally, what are some of the areas in which we're going to market, which we're using to reach developers, and that we've been successful in engaging with the community. So really, at the core of Salesforce.com, if you've ever seen our logo, which especially developers sometimes find interesting, is a big no software logo. And it's funny, if you think about a lot of where Salesforce, I think, and Google are trying to solve common problems, it's around this idea, of course, that the internet is increasingly more capable of supporting more and more kinds of applications, and ultimately more kinds of ways in which we interact. Salesforce was started back in '99 with the idea that enterprise applications, or things that traditionally existed in big, complex enterprise applications, could increasingly move onto the internet. And if you think back to '99, that's a somewhat radical idea. You think to 2007, it's quite amazing how much of that, again, with the help of companies like yours, is coming true. So the parts that we've been well known for in that mission have been around really customer-facing business processes, CRM, customer relationship management. And that really was the entry point, and we've been very successful in that space and have done a lot of interesting things there and continue to do a lot of interesting things there. The part of our business that you might not be as familiar with that I really wanted to focus on today is our platform business, and that's really where myself and the team here spends most of our time, which is that original no software logo. Our mission wasn't no CRM software, it was no software. So really what we've been spending a lot of our time doing, and I've been focused almost exclusively for about the past 5 years or so on, is the idea of taking what we've learned from the CRM market and providing a generic enterprise application platform for building really database-centric applications, but doing so entirely on demand. And that'll really be the focus of what we kind of talk about. This is our safe harbor statement. So again, you may be familiar with our CRM applications, and I'll very quickly show some of those to you, just if you haven't seen them before. So this is Salesforce.com. Set of tabs across the top, In this case, we're looking at our sales application, and you can see that because we have 3 different applications installed in this particular account. We've got a set of tabs. Each of the tabs corresponds to roughly a different module. Here I can see all the list of the accounts in this particular system. I can see a list of all the contacts in this particular system. And an account or a contact will obviously just be a representation of who that person is, who the company is doing business with. And there's a lot of depth there, but very straightforward. The big idea, of course, is that if you look architecturally at how this application is built and delivered, it resembles your systems or eBay systems or Amazon systems much more than it would resemble something like a Siebel or an Oracle apps under the hood, in that it's a multi-tenant architecture. Each time we roll out a new customer, we're not, of course, provisioning a whole new separate set of infrastructure and servers and databases, much in the same way that each time somebody signs up for your spreadsheet service or your Gmail service, you, of course, are not rolling out a whole new stack of infrastructure. Yeah?
Just a quick one. Is it that fast or is it faster in reality? I mean, that's a kind of different user expectation. When you change the tabs or when you select something in the
Sure. So the question is about kind of the speed and the performance of the system. And it's an interesting question. So we're obviously running over a Wi-Fi network. We're running on production here. So this is not a special test system or anything. This is the same environment that all of our 650,000 plus subscribers are using right now. What's one of the things that's interesting, and we get this a lot, is a lot of the challenges that enterprise IT organizations have with traditional CRM systems is making them performant. And you'd think that we'd have a much bigger challenge, which we do, of course, keeping the system running very, very quickly. But it's amazing how frequently we talk to customers, and one of the main complaints they have with their existing software systems is the IT organization just can't make it fast. So even that as a value proposition has turned out to be quite powerful for us. I'll answer that question as well. This is something else that we've kind of learned along the way. And again, this maybe highlights some of the differences about working with a corporate environment as opposed to a consumer environment, is that we publish all of the information about our system performance and any system issues entirely to the public. This is trust.salesforce.com. I haven't logged in or anything to get there. This is an entirely public website. And one of the things that you'll see, in addition to kind of showing the service status of our different instances, is you'll see a transaction count and a response rate count. So I love that we do this, because no better way of keeping you honest than actually just publishing all of the information. The other thing is just quite fascinating to look at. I was looking at a screenshot from an older presentation where we were looking at talking about this particular site, and it was back in March, and it said something like, a big day was something like 60 million transactions. Here we are in August, we're already up to 100 million transactions. So obviously there's a lot of growth there, and there's a lot of work that we do in order to keep that kind of application running in a performant way. Another thing that's interesting, stealing some of my thunder from later a little bit here, so we launched our original Web Services API back in 2003. And I can talk a lot about it, and hopefully I'll be able to show that a little bit. But one of the really rewarding things, as somebody whose job it is to get out there and get people using the API, is we actually do more web services traffic every day than we do HTML traffic. So we have more interactions from web services clients than we do web browser clients. So if you look at the numbers, yesterday we did 98 million transactions, so more than half of those were SOAP as opposed to HTML. So very gratifying to see the API being used so heavily. OK. So a lot of things that are unique about the on-demand model, a lot of things that are unique about this new world of no software, where we're obviously delivering these applications as a service. And one of the things that we're always looking for ways in which we can take advantage of the fact that we deliver our service on the internet, and as opposed to traditional software, and just find further ways of providing differentiation around that. Much in the same way, I'm sure, for example, that the great thing about Sheets or in a product like that is obviously the collaboration. You can kind of think of similar examples in the enterprise application space. One of the more powerful manifestations of that is something called AppExchange. So as I mentioned, we have a whole strategy around letting developers and our customers and third-party ISVs build applications on our platform. And built into that, we have the idea that anything that you build on our platform can be immediately shareable. And so that directory of applications where anybody in the world can go and sign up for free and they can go post their applications, that's what we call AppExchange. And again, we think about those kind of strategies going hand in hand. So this is, again, another just publicly available website that anybody can go to, appexchange.com. And hopefully, more of our strategy will become clear here, where you can see that we now have over 600 applications in this application directory. Obviously, there's a lot of CRM kinds of applications, things like email marketing or contract management or specialized CTI services for the service and support market. But we also have things like recruiting or different kinds of IT management, IT help desk kinds of applications. And if I go over to recruiting, it's pretty straightforward. Here's a category of recruiting applications, and we're trying to make this as internet-ish as possible and provide feedback and rankings and reviews. The difference here is how you get an application. And in this case, I can go and look at the details, look at the reviews. If I want to actually test drive the application and look at it, and again, this is all publicly available. I'm not logged in any way. I can do that. And you'll see here, after I fill out my information, which I clearly should have done already. I'll use this part of the presentation to highlight how you can get in touch with me. OK. Yeah, I planned that. And so we can actually now interact with this. Just like I get that kind of 30-second preview of a song on iTunes, I can now actually test drive and click around in this recruiting application. And so a very different model from how a business would traditionally get an enterprise application. And one of the things that you'll notice when I flip here is that I have a recruiting application, right? You didn't see that in my other account. And when I flip to that, you'll see I have a whole entirely new set of tabs. And this is what we mean by our platform. This is what we mean by our app dev model. The fact that you as a developer can go to developer.salesforce.com, sign up for a free Developer Edition account, and really create any kind of business database-centric application that you like. And so before, we looked at contacts and accounts and opportunities and everything related to a sales business process. Here I have candidates and applicants and all those kinds of things that obviously make sense for a different use case. And so just to clarify, nobody at Salesforce.com, nobody in our R&D organization created this application. This is an application that a developer in our community or at a customer would create themselves. And in fact, recruiting, as an example, is one area in particular where we've seen a lot of activity beyond CRM, going beyond our traditional base, now using the platform in the new ways, which of course is something that we very much are trying to encourage. And again, instead of looking at an account or a person, here I'm looking at a candidate. I can track really anything that's associated with that person. I can track which jobs they've applied for, what the status is, all those kinds of things. OK. I'm on slide 2, and I've used up 20 minutes, so we'll see how I do. So really, what we are about is really database-centric apps. And of course, database-centric apps are at the center of corporate IT app dev, or have been for some time. You think about tools in the old days, like the first green screen mainframes. What were they doing? They were kind of doing this database-centric apps, or where Power Builder and Oracle or VB. There's obviously a lot of activity in corporate IT and in the ISV community around essentially creating structured data, how multiple people collaborate around that data, and all of the things that are in common on those applications. You need to have concepts of how you create a user interface and forms and edit fields, and there's a whole security and sharing model that has to be appropriate, because in the recruiting application, some people need to be able to see the salary field, whereas others can't. You need to obviously run in a highly performant way. There are analytics requirements. There's a whole common set of things to building database applications. Again, and there's been a rich history of of tools companies that have gone after that and been very successful in doing so in kind of the various iterations of computing, right? You could think about all the database tools and app tools companies that were of the mainframe era or of the client-server era, and we very immodestly are trying to provide a similar capability of this new internet on-demand era. One of the things that, and I'm just going to skip over this for now, that makes this interesting is there are really two kind of distinct benefits, at least two, of using this new model. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about both. One is, of course, that it's delivered on demand. So for the first time, we can kind of separate in a meaningful way what it means to build an application from what it means to run an application. And I don't know what kinds of developers we have represented in the room, but my sense is if there are a lot of folks like me, especially in corporate IT, who are plenty happy to build an application, plenty happy to build a data model or describe what a business process is. But when it comes to like tuning and optimization and carrying a pager and running a data center and all those kinds of things, that turns out to be really, really hard. Especially doing it with the kind of variability that you get in these different kinds of applications. I might want to build an application that works for my team to manage our conferences, right? So there are 5 people on that. Alternatively, I might be a company like Google with however many thousands of employees that you have where you want to manage recruiting. And so what we've tried to do with this platform is just following, obviously, this utility model the internet allows, is separate out what you have to think about in terms of building an application from ever having to have any runtime implications. Whether you're serving 1 person or 15,000 people with your application, you should not have to worry about it. And that's a pretty neat trick, right? This is a lot of the elasticity or kind of utility capability of the internet that we've been working on as an industry for some time. And the key thing is that it's absolutely possible, and we have lots of folks that are doing it today. One big if, you have to think about how you write your application differently. So what it means to build apps in this utility model, right, requires new ways of thinking about app dev. And that, frankly, is probably one of our bigger challenges and opportunities on the developer relations side, which is if you just approach this as a VB developer or just a Java developer or just a C developer and aren't kind of ready to think a little bit differently about some of the concepts, then it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. And again, frankly, that's where we have spent a lot of time educating people, is around the difference in our app dev model. And to do that, we kind of split it out into these 4 different areas and pillars that we talk about: our database, our app framework, our API, and Apex code. And I'll be hopefully have an opportunity to quickly review these so you guys get a kind of flavor of what this new app dev model looks like. So really at the core of Salesforce.com and at the core of our intellectual property and the core of what the really smart people at the company have been working on for the past 8 or 9 years is this idea of an on-demand database, an internet database, a database in the sky. And it looks and feels and does all the things that you would expect a database to do. It manages relational data. It has lots of different kinds of fields. It has a full security and sharing model. It has a SOCL or a SQL-like query language that we call SOCL. And of course, if you start with a premise of a database, you can then, that allows you to both add fields and add objects, then of course you can really model anything. And that's kind of the foundation to be able to create the difference between a CRM application and a recruiting application. The problem is that you well know, just like you can't take Exchange Server and run Gmail on that, you can't buy a commercial database off the street and run an internet multi-tenant scalable database that has all these properties. So really what we've done internally is build a database. We use a lot of different technologies to do that, but all the things that you think about in a database's operations, query optimization, statistics gathering, all that kind of stuff, we had to essentially recreate ourselves in order to build that. And I think we probably did it slowly then quickly, right? Probably part of that we did because we had to support a CRM application, and then at some point you realize you have something that's truly malleable beyond that, and we've been investing a lot in doing that. Yep.
How do you deal with like sensitive data? Because you're hosting these customers. I assume this is stuff that's hosted at your server.
Absolutely.
And it's these customers, probably in some cases really sensitive, confidential information.
Yep.
How do you keep customers over that hump, or how do you deal with it?
So the question is, how do we deal with sensitive information by virtue of being both an on-demand service and a multi-tenant on-demand service, how have we been able to get small companies like Zagat's all the way up to large companies like Cisco or Merrill Lynch to run their business on this infrastructure? And that really is the core evangelism task of our company, really in the industry. And so if you were to look back in 2002 and the kinds of companies that were engaging in this and, classic kind of adoption curve, and where we first got our start with smaller high-tech companies and companies that were going to be more accepting of a new model, that was kind of where we started. But of course, I think we're really in the mainstream now of people accepting on-demand, and I hope that work that we've done in evangelizing a lot of customers helps you as you enter the enterprise space as well. And I think fundamentally it just has to do with economics. It's just raw logic at some point becomes overpowering with the amount of success that we've been able to deliver to our customers. That ThinkPad needs juice. Let's find the guy who built that noise. Yeah, please.
What about, do you have policies or anything about the fact whether your own employees can access this data? I imagine in some cases if there's like a bug or something, you have to look at some of this stuff, but there must be issues with that.
So as you can imagine, and the question again, do we have policies about how we handle that? There's a reason why all that information about our performance is on the website. And if you start even peeling back the onion on that, we have layers and layers and layers of policies. We have certifications. We have a whole buildings full of people who focus exclusively on that. And winning our customers' trust, as the folks from our sales organization who are here today would tell you, is an essential part of the sales cycle. The thing that's different now, as opposed to in 2002, is we can say that Merrill Lynch and Cisco and Dell and thousands and thousands of other companies have vetted this. And that's part of the power of the multi-tenant model, is the more eyes you have on it, in a way that the better it should kind of behave ultimately. So it's a combination, just the raw power of the model and just the raw hard work of making sure you are doing the right things and you document and you train your customer-facing people to talk about it in an effective way. Yeah?
How does your database management system compare with Oracle? I know it's highly scalable, but how about other features?
I'm not an Oracle expert per se, so might not be the best person to ask. The question is, how do we compare to Oracle? Just best left at a high-level analogy of a multi-tenant system, as you guys well know. To use a really poor analogy, this is different as Excel and Sheets in terms of the internal operation. A single tenant, Excel is a single tenant system of the highest order. It's just sitting on somebody's desktop. Sheets is a shared single instance or a single code base version that has however many millions and millions of customers. And so architecturally, again, everything in how we think and write and operate, we owe unapologetically to the consumer internet and the lessons from there, as opposed to traditional software. So, it's a question in the back.
I have two questions.
Okay.
One is, this changes the model in which you deliver an application to which one is there's somebody who is writing the code to operate and going code. And so he needs to own that code. And the second part is the buyer of this code needs to own the data they put into that database. Let's say I buy this application and I put my company's data into it. I don't want the writer of the app nor Salesforce to have access to that data. But I still want to be able to back it up, delete it, restore it, whatever I want to do. So how does that work?
So if I think I can condense the question down to one, it's this question of intellectual property and ownership. If I'm both building an application and the intellectual property that represents, as well as the data that application is operating on, how does that work in terms of intellectual property and ownership if it is multi-tenant system? And it's exactly the way that you would expect that our customers retain absolute 100% ownership, no exceptions on that data. It's in fact, I'd argue, another place where perhaps the consumer world and the enterprise world is different, in that we're not afforded any opportunity to have that line be blurry in the slightest, nor do we look to have that line be blurry. We consider ourselves a bank for our customers' data. And our job is to manage it and make it secure and do a better job at doing so than if they were to keep it under their mattress. But the ownership is 100% our customers. Okay, so we have this database, but then we have something else called our app framework, which is really interesting into itself. And one of the great things about building an on-demand platform, as opposed to traditional enterprise software platform, is we're able to introduce new app dev technologies into the enterprise much, much more frequently than some of the alternatives, right? So I'm sure there are lots of interesting technologies that folks in traditional software companies are working on in terms of next generation enterprise software platforms. The problem is the diffusion of that technology, right? SAP will come out with release 12, whatever it is, in 2009. I'm making all this stuff up. The delta between when they release that, or worse, an engineer writing that code, working on that feature, and when an actual customer gets to take advantage of that, well, you've got a whole release deployment cycle in enterprise software. Right? That's a 5 to 7 year process. That's a hugely slow diffusion time. In contrast, just like you guys, we add new app dev features to our platform, just like you guys add a new API, everybody gets it instantly. So as a result, in a way, we've been able to leapfrog some of our competitors in terms of the app dev technologies we're able to provide, which is just very exciting in general in terms of the opportunity it presents to developers. And one of the key things that we've really bet heavily on is the idea of declarative or metadata-based development. And this really represents the core pillar of our platform and app dev model. And so rather than talk about it, I will show it to you. And to do that, I'll just go ahead and go back into this application that I was running before. Let me just make sure that I'm still logged in. And let's go back to the contact screen. So the most simple kind of application development that our customers want to do is modify their CRM application, right? Because every company's customer-facing business processes are going to be different. Every company's selling different kinds of things. They're engaged in different ways. So let me just actually log back into this. Give me 1 second. Opened up that demo, did something else. So you remember taking a look at the contact screen, a bunch of data really representing an object, representing just a database concept, nothing too dramatic there. And it's even faster over a hardwired internet connection, but that's OK. So let's take a look at this contact. And I've got a layout. I've got information. I've got a bunch of fields. All the related information to that contact. Interesting stuff. So since I'm an administrator in this account, I have access to the setup menu, which I'm going to go to now. And I'm actually going to do the simplest form of application development. I'm going to modify the schema of this application. And in particular, I'm going to modify this representation of a contact to add a new property that this company wants to track. And so I'll go to Customize, Contacts, Fields. And here you can see you get really a database view, just like you would in a traditional database application, of this application. Of course, the difference being that it's delivered on demand. So really, right, looking at the schema, you can see kind of the schema details. What I'm going to do, though, is go ahead and create a new field. And let's say, hypothetically, that the thing that this company wants to track about its contacts is the computer preference of the people it does business with. So here I can see, you see I have a set of data types, just like you would get in a traditional database. And there's some of these are higher level than you would get kind of just a raw kind of Oracle SQL level. You have things like phone numbers as a strongly typed object, got emails, those kinds of things. There's a concept of formula fields that's quite useful. And I'm actually going to go ahead and create a pick list. And when I do that, I'll get an option just to really specify some of the basic things. So I'm going to call this computer preference. And I'll do Mac, PC, Linux. And I'm just going to skip over the rest of the stuff. One of the things that you'll see is I'm immediately prompted next with how the security settings that I want to associate with that field. Again, we use that example of the salary information. One of my favorite examples is we have a customer who sells musical instruments to musicians, many of whom are celebrities. So there's some percentage of the people in the organization that need to have access to that person's phone number, but obviously you want to restrict that field from a majority of people. So a concept of profiles, right, groups of users, fairly standard stuff. I'm going to skip over this. And the key thing is that it's standard stuff, but it's stuff that most developers, even in IT organizations today, still have to build themselves. The amount of time that our customers tell us they spend building that infrastructure, building the plumbing, forget the actual operation of the application, just from an app dev point of view, is pretty interesting. Finally, we have a concept of different page layouts. I'm going to skip that now and just click Save. So what we've done is change the metadata definition of this application. Right? It's not technically XML under the hood, but it just as easily could be. Right? So we've changed this metadata. And really the way our platform works is it then interprets that definition of the application and essentially re-renders it on every request, which is a pretty neat trick. What the implication of that is you'll notice I haven't logged out. Clearly nobody's rebooted Salesforce.com, yet the fundamental behavior and nature of the application has now changed. And I can go back into the contacts screen. And we'll go ahead and look at that same contact I was looking at before. And is this one of those companies like with the guest Wi-Fi is like really slow? And I'm just kidding. If I was on the real, it was employee Wi-Fi. Woof. We don't even have Wi-Fi, so we don't have guest Wi-Fi. So I'm grateful for it. And we will then see the computer preference field that I just added. I'll click Edit, and we'll see the values there. Now, one of the interesting things, right, because it's not just about the database, it's about the entire application that I've now modified, is that same field is available in reporting, it's available in analytics, it's available in our offline edition, it's available in our mobile edition, it's available in our web services API. If I did WSDL to Java on our WSDL right now, I would emit a Java bean for the contact object that would have getters and setters for computer preference on it. All right, go ahead.
Is this customization visible to this particular customer?
Yes, so all of the customizations are within, so a customer is a concept we have as an org. So a segmentation of a customer is an org. You could have multiple people, inside of an org, and you set up your data and sharing inside of an org, and your customizations can apply within an org. If you want to share between orgs, so let's say, wow, this was a really compelling data model and application I built for helping PC manufacturers manage their customers, I could then export that metadata as an AppExchange package and share it either for free or commercially with anybody else. So that sharing act is something that's very explicit and actually forms the basis of our ISV value proposition. OK. And it's really funny because I see this is probably the single hardest concept for developers interacting with our platform to get. Because if you don't understand the metadata and how that interaction works, and there's a lot more to it, you tend to get tripped up on everything else. So if you think about what's happening at Salesforce as a traditional, like building a J2E app, right, where you're going through like some big static compilation process and some traditional deployment process, that right, just doesn't mesh with this idea of an on-demand or internet-based system, or at least in a multi-tenant system. And many, many people kind of come through the door with that frame, that set of expectations, which is completely natural and understandable, but it is a fair amount of work to make sure they're thinking about it in a way that's more useful. And I imagine that's something that you guys see as well and will continue to have as you, again, help developers think about building applications in this new model. OK. Yeah.
So I like this quite a bit. I have one question, though. So how different is this from Microsoft Access in the cloud? And I mean this in a good sense. I mean, Adam works here and stuff, and a lot of people build amazing things in Access, but it has certain strengths and limitations, and it's also very schema-driven.
Yes. Excellent question. This question is, how is this different than Microsoft Access in the cloud? And whether you want to call it Access in the cloud, or Oracle in the cloud, or Power Builder in the cloud, or VB in the cloud, just not to tie us too much to Access in particular, all of those things are appropriate in that this is very much a database application tool, right? It's not a general compute utility. It's not a search service. It's about building database-centric applications. And this, it does, one of the great things is, though, you're really able to bring the full weight of an enterprise-class platform in terms of the advanced features and security and sharing and all the operational and security things we have to do to support a 15,000-seat deployment on CRM. The great thing is we can bring that to 2 people building a database application that would otherwise live on desktop. So there's a great kind of asymmetry there that hasn't existed before, in the same way that I, as a consumer, get the full benefit of all of Google's infrastructure that, of course, is designed to build all these people. Question here.
So how do you see your developer community segmented? I mean, looking at what you just did, that's not like what a typical developer does. There's no code behind it or anything. Is there pieces that you can get into and actually manipulate the code? Is it all on the interface, or do you see these as typical developers?
That's a great segue. So we talked about, this is the app framework, and this is the foundation of what we do. Yet, there are 2 other essential pieces of our platform. One is our web services API. The other is something called Apex Code. So in the remaining time I have, let me quickly try and get to those, because I've now already used up far more than I anticipated. But that's a good thing. OK, we could talk about this, and you can read all about it at developer.salesforce.com, and I encourage you to do so. You can sign up for a free Developer Edition account, 2 users, build apps, share them on the AppExchange. We love it when you do that. The second pillar, then, is our API. So the great thing about the framework is it's really, really quick to build very powerful applications. The cost is it's constrained, right? If you want to do something that's outside of the framework, you have to build that yourself. The good news is we have this web services API that we love, that our developers love, that really lets you start doing a lot of interesting things. And this is where a lot of the interaction between us as companies are. And I'll, using the very, very brief time I have, make a little bit of a speech about our ISV opportunity in terms of how we segment our developers. So we think those kinds of capabilities, right, are available to non-developers. And in fact, there are a lot of people using Salesforce and doing that kind of stuff who wouldn't even think about themselves as developers. And that's another kind of something that Adam has taught us about as well, is you can have an Excel Power user who's doing app dev who doesn't even think about it as app dev. So that's a good problem to have. One of the opportunities, we also think about kind of IT developers, real, true corporate IT developers, and we also think about ISV developers. One of the really fascinating things about the ISV community right now, and I think it's a great time to be an ISV, is for the past 20 years, we've been kind of very much looking down as ISVs. We've been focused on the APIs that our operating systems present up, right? And that's your value as an ISV is the degree to which you can do very interesting things with those set of APIs that exist on a desktop platform or server platform. Brilliant thing about the market today, it's not about the desktop APIs, it's about the web APIs and how you can bring them together in interesting and fascinating ways. And again, that's where we've been working with Jeff and Scott and others in our collaboration with Google. Since there's so much white space in between these APIs, and every day a new APIs appear, fascinating opportunity to create new value. And so a great example of that is a company called Keaton. It was like a very small startup, Potrero Hill, in a garage in San Francisco. And they had the very smart idea of bringing together Salesforce's CRM APIs and the Google AdWords APIs, right? So they could create an application, let you manage all of your AdWords spend, but then also track what happens, not just a kind of click to purchase, but it could be click to lead to 6-month sales cycle that ends on a golf course, but you still retain full visibility. So, and that's really very powerful, right? Hugely powerful application that anybody who's doing anything other than e-commerce would probably want to have. Really strengthens the value of both of our offerings and creates unique value for this third party. Fantastic. That represents such a sliver of what's possible with Salesforce and such a sliver of what's possible with Google. Or then you can add eBay or Amazon or Yelp or anybody else into the mix, right? So much opportunity, and that's again where I think as partners we're really focused on energizing the community and helping them be successful in doing that. So I'll show you a demo that Jeff and one of our evangelists put together for our developer conference in May. And this is at least showing an example of what you can do with the API and once you get out of the framework. I've got to think of anecdotes I can tell while I wait for the pages to load. I probably should have started on that one. So, in reality, how the API is used in our customer accounts, a lot of it is very traditional enterprise integration. As you can imagine, the first objection that every major customer has when we try and sell them an on-demand service is say, well, is it secure and is it performant, right? And those are just objections that you have to kind of prove. Then they say, how do I integrate with it? You'll still read articles. I love this when you see like, some bloggers who maybe haven't been keeping up so much, and they'll say, oh, well, you can't integrate with on-demand. That's the great shortcoming of it. Well, of course, that's not true. In fact, web services standards and the whole movement to SOA in general only heightens the degree to which you can integrate with on-demand, and in fact makes integration more capable than other platforms. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and open up a view of accounts. I think I can. And what this is going to let me do, and again, working with Jeff, we put together some of the spreadsheet APIs with just some of our basic CRM and data access APIs. So we're going to do a little mashing. Of course, what I really should show is a map, but that's not very interesting. Trust me, we've shown plenty of Google Maps mashups before. And what this very simple demo is going to let me do, and I'm just resetting it, which hopefully will work, is let me select a few accounts, giving away some of the ta-da here. It resets data. Select a bunch of accounts, send that data over to a spreadsheet. I can then manipulate that data in a spreadsheet at a cell level, click update, and it'll send the changes back, right? Nothing, in order to do that, what am I doing? In this case, we happen to write it in JavaScript, but you could write it in any number of ways. Pure code, pure web services API, interactions. It is leveraging, for example, the framework. If I wanted to access that computer preference field I just created and tie that into the spreadsheet, I absolutely could, but that's very much outside of that metadata framework. We're now down to traditional procedural code, and again, that can be written in anything you like. So I'll go ahead and do this, and I might have to skip through it just for expediency. Select a bunch of accounts, click Connect to Google, sending the data to your spreadsheet APIs. And actually, there's a lot of cool stuff that we've worked out together, even just to implement something like this, the authentication models. Right? I need to have a way of this user being logged into Salesforce. We've already done the handshake, and another area where you guys have helped us is, like, let's just make sure we develop the best practice so when the next 6 startups come along and build applications that combine or take advantage of these technologies, they're using a best practice for that. So again, help understand some of the ways in which we collaborate there. And the spreadsheet, at some point in this presentation, will be magically updated. And of course, this is actually a great demo. People love this demo. And because it's the great thing about how you built your spreadsheet is that it'll actually update without me having to hit refresh. So it just goes boom. And the fact that obviously we're communicating from Salesforce over through the internet to Google, and then just the 2 browsers not even communicating but seeing a result. Fairly simple, but still pretty powerful example. Okay. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to wait for that to update, but you can get the basic gist, and you can update the data on a cell level here, click update, full web services capability. Question there? Nope, okay. Moving on.
That was JavaScript running on Salesforce servers.
It's in the browser, yep. Yep. And again, we have, if it can speak HTTP, somebody has built an integration to Salesforce with it, which is, again, a very gratifying thing. So in the enterprise side, you see a lot of traditional EAI tools, your TIBCOs and web methods and BizTalks. There's a lot of just kind of raw app dev and .NET and Java. There's a lot of JavaScript, as you guys, I'm sure, see as well. So really pretty much, again, to get to that 50 million transaction level, there's a lot of stuff going on every day. Can talk a lot about all the different things you could build using the API. We're very one of the best decisions we made was the original design decisions around the API. And unfortunately, I could give a separate 3-hour talk on this. Actually, I used to work with Nelson Minor at my previous company, and I know he did a lot of work on the original AdWords API. So we were able to trade notes way back when, like 2003, 2004, when that stuff was being developed, and hopefully help each other out in some of the lessons there. And there's a lot of debate about REST versus SOAP. All I'm going to say is if you do SOAP well, you can make some really powerful things happen. And we've been able to, by using kind of a noun-verb model, very few verbs, lots of nouns, but strongly typed through the power of SOAP, it's a pretty cool developer experience. So I encourage you to go check it out. We have tons of sample code and doc, and it's just immodestly, I'll say it's a very nice SOAP API. OK, talk a lot about that. Very quickly, what you're looking at here is the noun view, right? This is all through the API. You get all of your objects almost as just if they were local database objects, yet you're interacting with them over SOAP. OK, so people do all kinds of things, right? They build these integrations like we talked about. They build client apps like a Outlook connector or or a Word connector, all those kinds of things. And of course, the area that I think there's a real opportunity, especially between our companies and especially for ISVs, is in this area of mashup and composite applications. A lot of activity happening there. OK. Last piece. So we talked about the API, talked about the app framework. So this is something that's very new to us. This we just released in production on Monday. And this says, OK, I've got my framework. I can really define any kind of application within that context. I've got the API. I can do mashups and integrations and have programmatic control and database replication, all these cool things. What's left? Well, what I want to be able to do is express arbitrarily complex business logic onto the server, onto the service. I want to be able to say that when a new lead is created and saved, I want to check to see if that lead exists, and if it does, look up on the account and be able to count the number of leads and look at if there's an opportunity that's about to close in 70 days, and if it is, go ahead and escalate the priority of the routing of this lead and send it to a top sales rep measured by how much business they closed in the last 7 days. Or, you can imagine we could take any use case, any business process, and create something arbitrarily complex. How do you do that on demand? Well, what you need is an on-demand programming language. Now, an on-demand programming language, though, needs to have a lot of special characteristics because, of course, unlike a traditional programming language where the runtime, in a way, and really the whole computer is subservient to the language, right? I can write a piece of code easily, in fact, more easily than I could write a good piece of code that crashes my Mac or my Windows box. Instead, you need to invert that and make the code subservient to the runtime, among other things, right? Because this is still a multi-tenant on-demand infrastructure. That is Apex code. It's a programming language we introduced in September last year, now in production. And it is pretty cool. And really being able to say now, again, with a combination of those other two capabilities, you can really build anything on demand, which, of course, is our goal. I'll do this very quickly. Java-like syntax. And people ask us all the time, why don't you just use Java? Well, that's just like saying, why don't you guys just use Excel? It's not that we would use Java, or I shouldn't say that. Sounds a little bad for Java in that case. But obviously, there's nothing in Java that understands multi-tenancy, just as there's nothing in Excel that understands the internet. So while we are not reinventing things out of any kind of pride or arrogance, we absolutely, just like you guys, need to invent new concepts in order to accomplish some new things. The other thing that makes it very different, this is a business process language like stored procedure or an EJB. So in that sense, right, Java has a much broader footprint from an API point of view than would be useful here. In fact, Apex turns out to be pretty narrowly scoped in what it tries to do. So strongly typed, similar to stored procedures. It's transactional. It's compiled. I will give you a very simple example. Well, maybe not so simple. This is a trigger. So just like you'd have a trigger on a database in a stored procedure model, this is a trigger defined in Apex code that, in this case, you can see that it says on lead before insert before update. So for the lead object, before any of those two events occur, execute this code, which basically is going to go through and make sure that this new lead that's being inserted has a unique email address that doesn't exist anywhere in the system, and if not, error. So what's really cool about how we've approached this platform overall is if you build a custom object, you build a custom field to our system, it's indistinguishable from a standard object, something that we built ourselves. The same thing is true of logic that you express in Apex code. Regardless of how you interact with this, it's native to the system. Right? If I come in via the API, and I'm doing via web methods a bunch of new lead inserts, right, you still want this to fire as you would if you're coming in through the user interface. So it runs at a low level in that sense. Yeah?
How would you contrast that with, like, say, PL SQL or ABAP?
It's conceptually similar. So the question is, how is this like PL SQL or ABAP? Conceptually, it's very similar. You're going to use Apex in a lot of the ways in which you'd use PL SQL. Hopefully, a lot of things will already have taken care of for you in the app framework, so you don't have to rely on it as heavily. The difference is, of course, well, there are two differences. One, I think the syntax is nicer, and the second is that it's running on demand.
I'm going to ask a question on the query syntax. It's obvious that your on-demand database can't, well, maybe it's not obvious, but probably can't do all of the types of complicated queries that you do in SQL. But you kind of give the syntax as SQL-like. People get confused there, like they can't do certain things that they can with the SQL database.
Yeah. So questions about the SQL are how do you query? What's the syntax for querying information out of the system? And do people get confused? And I think one of the great design decisions we made is to do something called SOQL, which is a SQL-esque way of querying data. There are as many ways of asking a system for data as there are probably APIs in the world. And we said, hey, why don't we use the one that people know and see if we can go from there. So people very familiar. Downside is people will approach it with a set of expectations that aren't true. So it's a query language. It's not an analytics language, right? SQL, in the true sense, kind of does both things. And so the other thing is that it's object-based, really. It's not relational. So it's much closer in your interactions with it to kind of an OR mapping layer, which actually has a lot of benefits, unless you're trying to do arbitrary joins for analytics purposes, which is not something that it allows. You can see a bit of the syntax in here. So this is actual real code. Select email from lead where email in this set. So looks very familiar, but under the hood, very different.
I had a question about the issue of trust between Salesforce's end customers and these third-party developers.
OK.
Specifically, like support issues. If the customer has a problem, do they call you or do they call the end developer? And also, like, since they are writing code, is it somehow possible, or how do you prevent third-party developers from just changing the code from under someone and either maliciously or inadvertently doing something bad with the data or working things out?
Yeah. So the question's about kind of, you can have a lot of people participating in what was once a statically compiled kind of protected thing. Now, me as a customer, I'm interacting with this environment. Maybe I've installed third-party applications. And of course, then there's Salesforce itself. And a lot of our energy, frankly, is in working out these models. In a way, they're almost like collaborative app dev and execution models that haven't existed before by nature of the model that I think other companies will encounter as well. So to answer the questions, ISVs own support of their applications. We have all sorts of protection and permissions models around how you can modify things. So if I, as an ISV, created an application that defined a schema, I can make that immutable, right, and kind of lock that down so it can't be changed. So a lot of those kinds of solutions in there. In general, we have a lot of conversations about, well, can we do this? Will there be support implications? And my sense is our experience has been good. That if you have a trusted relationship with your customer, if you've made them successful in the past, if you're acting in good faith, you will be given the opportunity to do innovative things like this, even if folks know there are going to be some new things they have to learn along the way.
So the second part of the question was, I guess, maybe about versioning or something. So if like create an application, the customer adopts it, how does it work if the developer then wants to change the application or improve it?
Yes. So questions about versioning and how does that work if I'm a third-party developer? Maybe I've deployed that spreadsheet integration. I now want to update it. We have an upgrade model that would allow me as the ISV to say, hey, there's a new version, or essentially that, and it would just kind of automatically bring in that. And that's why the idea of not being able to modify the application kind of goes hand in hand with that. But I'll say it's a tricky issue, and it's not something that we're frankly still working out with our partners in the best way to do it. And also, frankly, it adds to the app dev burden, right? So we need to make sure that packaging and distributing applications as a commercial ISV on our platform doesn't add so much to the weight of the overall app dev experience that you start reducing some of the overall benefits. Very quickly, could talk about this a lot. Really the core in thinking about what we've created with Apex Code is just like we created a multi-tenant database, we've now really created a multi-tenant VM, where you have a set of governors that manage the execution of the code that prevent it from doing things that would otherwise be bad. So just like the governor of your car prevents you from going 200 miles an hour down Garcia Avenue, this will prevent you from doing an infinite loop or those kinds of things. So again, and there's a different set of expectations you need to communicate to developers about that, but net, hopefully they understand the benefit and can start creating productive applications. So in very rapid closing, because I want to leave some time for questions, and I'm already over my time here a little bit, I encourage you, if you're interested, to check out our developer site and learn more. You can get all the developer editions, all the tools, all that kind of stuff is free. You can check out some great tutorials and sample code that we've written with help with Jeff and the others around using Google APIs in this context. Welcome any suggestions. If you represent an API, you'd like to see us do some kind of integration with Salesforce and write about it and put up some sample code, we'd love to do that. Just let me know, agross@salesforce.com. And then finally, your company will be participating in our Dreamforce User and Developer Conference, which is September 16th to 19th in San Francisco. So if you're really interested in kind of meeting, about 25% of the 10,000 people that'll be there will be developers. So if you're interested in really kind of interacting with people who are doing this stuff in the community, in the ISV community, and understanding customers that are using this kind of stuff in the real world, encourage you to speak with, I'll volunteer Jeff again, or myself, and see if we can get you up there, because we'd love to have you, and Google will be participating as a partner in that event as well. Thanks for your time. I'll take questions as long as these guys let me. Yeah.
How much does it cost when I build an application that does something totally different than CRM with this platform? And, yeah.
I'm not a sales guy. I'm not allowed to talk about price. I'm just kidding. So our basic model works on a per user per month subscription basis. It starts anywhere from $25 up to $295 based on what pieces of the service you want. If you want Apex Code, you're going to be at the high end. If you just want basic database stuff, you're going to be at the low end. But I'm happy to work with you to find a deal. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so we think about our business kind of on a per subscriber basis. Yeah.
What does the development environment look like for the coding?
Oh, I didn't even show that. No. That's what you get for sticking around, is you get the extra special part of the demo. So we have an Eclipse plugin. And so what's cool about this is a piece of Apex code. And when I actually modify it and break it, let's see, it's sending the code up to Salesforce, compiling it, and then relaying stuff like the line number errors down to the IDE. So the IDE becomes merely just a UI for creating code as opposed to an actual development tool. And we support this for JavaScript as well, also for doing things like query building and query testing. And we're actually just about to release a new version of this as well. So this whole separate interesting space, right? How do you build tools for on-demand application development, which I know you guys are also looking at. But you can also get this at our developer site if you want to play with it and kick the tires. The one out there now is beta, so. I will say also this is BSD open source. So if you want the code to the Eclipse stuff and modify it for your own purposes, we welcome that as well.
Two questions actually. So on the API side, you're
at a high level, you're trying to generalize things as much as you can, and things that would be useful for a lot of people. But on the other hand, you have customers like Merrill Lynch who have huge legacy systems, huge legacy LDAP integration points, and come with a certain demand. And how do you deal with that kind of feature creep on the one hand on the API side, and on the other hand, also when you want to scale this thing up, scalability and performance on a large scale, you can't think of everything up front, but you run into certain obstacles as you go along with this system.
So first question, how do we deal with large customers and some specific requests they'll have? And this is actually a good time to introduce another thing I haven't demoed yet, which is something that we have called AppExchange, ideas.salesforce.com. And I say this because we have a lot of customers, a lot of different sizes, and we want to make sure that the small ones are heard with equal weight as our large ones, because kind of left to its own devices, a company will just listen to those that are kind of largest. So this is a website we launched a couple months ago that lets our customers vote on all their favorite features. Anybody can create an idea, kind of this dig-style interface. They can provide comments. There's actually a very rich interactions that happen not just around our logo, but with our product manager. So here people are asking for the ability to double click on a field and do inline editing. You can see it's been voted heavily. We then in internal R&D operations will use things like the AppExchange weightings to look at features. So we have processes, we get some from big customers, stuff from small. The great thing is as our platform becomes more capable, there's less and less that customers just can't do for themselves. So that's the meta goal, right? And we've been quite successful in that. So we've never had to build an API just for a particular customer. There are people who say, we need an API that'll do X, Y, and Z. Can you build that? But it's always represented in a generic way. And in fact, one of the cool things about Apex code is any code that you write, you can automatically turn into a web service with a simple additional declaration. So in fact, now you can create your own web services on our platform, which again, the less that we can do on a per customer basis, well, we can't do anything on a per customer basis, but the less we have to be driven that way, the better. Great. Oh, sure.
The scalability question.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was ignoring that one. Yeah, lots of really insanely great, insanely smart people who solve those kinds of problems, but I'm not, unfortunately, one of them. But you can imagine, right, look at the traffic volumes. You look at, just like I'm sure you guys, traffic volumes go like that. And keeping up with that, we have a lot of people who work on that problem. And also think about, right, we add something like Apex code into the mix. So we, in addition, right, the requests become more expensive effectively as well. So good thing CPUs are getting cheaper. OK. Hope to see you guys at Dreamforce.